This 4-year-old beggar girl holds the hand of a dead man in his casket, saying, "He was the only one who loved me." But his millionaire son hears everything and is shocked to discover something that shocks everyone. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The funeral of Sebastian Mendez should have been just another solemn farewell in the small town of Harmony Creek. But what happened that March afternoon turned everything into a mystery no one expected. Peterson and Son's funeral home was packed with business owners, friends, and acquaintances who came to pay their last respects to the man who had built one of the largest construction supply businesses in the region. The air was heavy with the scent of white lilies, and the low murmur of respectful conversations echoed through the dark wood-paneled walls. Dante Mendez, 35, stood rigidly beside the mahogany casket where his father lay. Dressed in a flawlessly tailored black suit, he controlled every emotion, every gesture, every word directed at the visitors. This was how he always dealt with difficult situations, organizing, controlling, keeping everything in its proper place. His green eyes, a Mendez family trait, scanned the room with the same precision he used to analyze contracts in his law office. Everything was being conducted exactly as he had planned until she appeared. The child emerged like an apparition among the grieving adults. Isabella, 6 years old, was barefoot and wore a faded blue dress, clearly too big for her small frame. Her brown hair was disheveled, and there was a profound sadness in her green eyes, the same eyes that Dante immediately recognized as an unmistakable mark of the family. She moved through the room with a determination that contrasted with her fragile appearance, ignoring the curious stares and the timid attempts of some adults to stop her. When the girl reached the casket, the silence in the funeral home became absolute. Isabella extended her small hand and held Sebastian's cold hand, interlacing her fingers with his as if it were the most natural gesture in the world. Tears began to stream down her cheeks as she whispered words that made the hearts of everyone present clench. "You promised you'd never leave me, Grandpa Sebastian. You were the only one who truly loved me." Dante felt the ground move beneath his feet. Grandpa, how could an unknown child call his father Grandpa? He approached slowly, observing the impossible scene unfolding before his eyes. The girl continued to talk to Sebastian as if he could hear her, telling him about her week at the Sunny Meadows orphanage, about the drawings she had made for him, about how she was waiting for his weekly visit that would never come again. "Honey, you shouldn't be here," Dante said in a firm but not harsh voice, crouching down to be at the child's level. "This isn't a place for children." Isabella raised her tear-swollen eyes and looked at him with a mixture of sadness and defiance. "He's my Grandpa Sebastian. I have the right to be here." Her small voice carried a conviction that left Dante speechless. "Your grandpa? What do you mean, kiddo? What's your full name?" Dante tried to keep his tone gentle, but confusion was taking over his organized thoughts. "Isabella, and Grandpa Sebastian always said I was special, that I had the family eyes." She pointed to her own green eyes, so similar to Dante's that it was almost disturbing. Murmurs began to spread through the funeral home. Dante could feel the curious stares and the whispered speculations of those present. His entire life had been built on control and predictability, and now an unknown child was destroying it all with a few innocent words. Karen Miller, 45, the director of Sunny Meadows Orphanage, appeared discreetly beside Isabella. She was a middle-aged woman with grey hair pulled back in a simple bun and brown eyes that conveyed the tired kindness of someone who dedicates their life to caring for abandoned children. She gently held Isabella's shoulder. "I'm so sorry for the trouble, Mr. Mendez," Karen said in a low, respectful voice. "Isabella ran away from the orphanage when she heard the news. She had a very strong bond with your father, Sebastian." "Bond? What kind of bond? My father never mentioned knowing children from the orphanage. Dante stood up, his intimidating height contrasting with the forced politeness in his voice. Karen hesitated for a moment, her eyes moving from Dante to Isabella and back to him. Your father has been visiting our orphanage for almost 5 years, Mr. Mendez. Every Thursday afternoon. He had a special affection for Isabella. The revelation hit Dante like a punch to the gut. 5 years. His father had kept this a secret for 5 years. He who knew every detail of Sebastian's schedule, every appointment, every business meeting, had never heard a word about visits to orphanages. That's impossible, Dante murmured, more to himself than to Karen. My father told me everything about his commitments. Isabella let go of Sebastian's hand and turned to Dante with an expression that mixed innocence and wisdom beyond her 6 years. Grandpa Sebastian said you were too busy to know about me. He said you took care of the important papers and he took care of the important people. The child's words echoed through the room like a sentence. Dante felt a mixture of shame and anger growing in his chest. How had his father dared to keep something so significant a secret? And why did an unknown child seem to know aspects of Sebastian that his own son didn't? The afternoon was turning into a nightmare of revelations. Each word that Isabella spoke brought to light a side of Sebastian that Dante had never seen. Man who brought homemade sweets to an orphaned girl, who knew her favorite stories, who had become a father figure to a child who didn't even belong to the family. Karen, I need to speak with you privately, Dante said, trying to regain control of the situation. Now. Of course, Mr. Mendez. But first I need to take Isabella back. She shouldn't have left the orphanage alone. I don't want to go, Isabella protested, clinging to the edge of the casket. I want to stay with Grandpa Sebastian. He promised he'd never abandon me. The desperation in the child's voice cut through the hearts of everyone present. Dante watched the scene with a mixture of compassion and irritation. His perfectly organized life was being turned upside down by a 6-year-old girl who claimed to have a relationship with his father that he knew nothing about. When they finally managed to convince Isabella to return with Karen, promising that she could visit the grave after the burial, Dante was left alone with his questions. The guests began to disperse, but the whispers and curious stares continued. In just one afternoon, his reputation as a controlled man who knew every detail of his family's life had been publicly shaken. That night, Dante stayed in his office late, mentally replaying every conversation he had had with his father in recent months. How had he missed something so important? And even more frightening, what other secrets had Sebastian taken with him to the grave? The next morning brought Sebastian's burial, but Dante could barely concentrate on the ceremony. His hands trembled slightly as he held the first handful of dirt, a gesture that symbolized the final farewell. The cemetery was crowded, but his eyes constantly searched for a small figure that might appear among those present. Isabella didn't come, but her absence weighed as heavily as her presence at the wake had weighed. After the last condolences from acquaintances, Dante drove straight to Sunny Meadows Orphanage. It was a 2-story building painted a faded yellow, located in the less affluent part of town. The rusty iron gate creaked as it opened, and the dirt yard was dotted with broken toys and a few children playing under the supervision of staff members who seemed overworked. Karen greeted him at the door with a tired smile. Mr. Mendez, I figured you'd come today. Please come in. Isabella's in her room. She hasn't wanted to come down to play since she got back yesterday. The interior of the orphanage smelled of cheap detergent and reheated food. The walls were peeling in places, and the furniture was clearly donated, a mixture of styles and eras that created a melancholy atmosphere. Dante followed Karen down a narrow hallway, noting the details that revealed the precariousness of the institution. Karen, I need to understand exactly what my father's relationship with this place was. With Isabella specifically, Dante maintained. a professional tone, but there was an urgency in his voice that he couldn't disguise. Karen led him to her small administrative office filled with stacked files and a scratched wooden desk. She poured coffee into mismatched cups before sitting down. "Your father, Sebastian, started coming here 5 years ago, Mr. Mendez. At first he brought small donations, clothes, some toys. But then he became interested in the children, individually. And Isabella, she arrived here when she was just 1.5 years old, abandoned at the door without any information about her parents. She was a very sick baby, cried constantly, had difficulty feeding. Many families came to meet her for adoption, but no one could handle her special needs." Dante leaned forward. "Special needs." Isabella was born with a rare heart condition, nothing fatal, but it requires regular medical care and controlled medication. For an average family, that represents high costs and a lot of responsibility. Karen paused, nervously tapping a pen. "But your father, Sebastian, he fell in love with her from the first visit." "What do you mean, fell in love?" "He arrived here on a rainy Thursday, complaining that his employees at the store had insisted he'd come to see the orphanage. He said he didn't have time for sentimentalities, but that he would make a quick donation to get rid of their pressure." Karen smiled at the memory. "Isabella was in the nursery crying for hours. The caregivers were exhausted. Your father picked her up, and like magic she stopped crying immediately." Dante felt a pang in his chest. His father had always been affectionate with him as a child, but in a restrained, almost formal way. The image of Sebastian comforting an unknown baby seemed impossible. He came back the following week, and the next, and the next. Always on Thursdays, always at the same time. He brought medication for Isabella, paid for private medical appointments, and when she grew up a little more, he started bringing homemade sweets that he made himself. "My father didn't know how to cook," Dante interrupted, frowning. "He learned because of her. Isabella didn't like the store-bought sweets. She once said they were bitter. So your father started making fudge, coconut kisses, little condensed milk sweets. He brought them in an old tin that she loved to open." Dante fell silent, processing. Information that contradicted everything he knew about his father. Sebastian Mendez was a practical man, focused on business, who considered excessive displays of affection a waste of time. How had he become a devoted grandfather to an orphaned child? "Can I see Isabella?" he asked finally. "Of course, but she's very shaken up. She's hardly eaten anything since yesterday." Karen led him to the second floor, where the older children's rooms were located. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, with numbered doors painted in faded colors. She stopped at door number 7 and knocked gently. "Isabella, honey, you have a visitor. I don't want to see anyone," came the muffled reply from inside the room. "It's Mr. Mendez, Grandpa Sebastian's son." There was a long pause before the door. Opened slowly. Isabella appeared with her eyes swollen from crying, wearing the same blue dress from the day before. She looked at Dante with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The room was small and Spartan. 2 twin beds with thin mattresses, a low plywood closet, and a small window that overlooked the yard. On Isabella's bed, Dante noticed something that made him freeze, a framed photo of his father, smiling next to the girl in front of a carousel. "Where did you get that photo?" Dante asked, pointing to the picture. "Grandpa Sebastian gave it to me on my last birthday. He said it was so I would never forget how alike we are." Isabella picked up the photo carefully. "Look, the same eyes." Dante crouched down to examine the photo more closely. It was recent. Clearly taken in recent months. Sebastian was wearing a blue shirt that Dante recognized. He had given it to him as a Christmas gift, but what impacted him most was the expression on his father's face. It was genuine, spontaneous happiness, completely different from the polite smiles he wore in family photos. "Isabella, do you know where your grandfather got the money to buy your medications?" The girl tilted her head thoughtfully. He always said I was an investment, that taking care of me was more important than any of his businesses. But you're not really his granddaughter, are you? I mean, you're not blood relatives. Isabella stared at him with those disturbingly familiar green eyes. Grandpa Sebastian said, family isn't just blood. He said I'm family because he chose to love me. The child's words echoed in Dante's mind like a painful revelation. All his life he had struggled to win his father's approval, following in his footsteps in business, graduating from law school to help with the company's contracts, maintaining a serious and professional demeanor that he believed Sebastian expected of him. And now he discovered that his father had chosen to love an unknown child with a naturalness that he had never shown with his own son. Did he talk about me to you? Dante asked, trying to disguise the vulnerability in his voice. Yes, he did. He said you were very intelligent and that you took very good care of the important papers at the store. But he also said you were always very serious, that you forgot to smile. Isabella paused, examining Dante's face. Why don't you smile? The innocent question hit Dante like an arrow. When was the last time he had really smiled? When was the last time he had done something just for joy, without calculating benefits or consequences? Karen, who had been silently watching the interaction, gently touched Dante's arm. Mr. Mendez, there's something else you need to know. About your father's visits, they weren't just social. What do you mean? Sebastian was investigating something. In the weeks leading up to, before he passed, he asked a lot of questions about Isabella's past. He wanted to know details about who had left her here, if there were any clues about her biological family. Dante felt a chill run down his spine. And were there? Very little. But your father seemed convinced he had found something important. On his last visit, he said that soon everything would make sense. Isabella, who had overheard the conversation, looked at Dante with eyes shining with suppressed tears. Grandpa Sebastian promised he was going to tell me a very important secret. He said it would change everything for me. Dante looked at the girl, then at the photo where his father smiled genuinely and felt that he was only at the beginning of discovering who Sebastian Mendez really was. And even more frightening, he began to suspect that this secret his father had discovered could change not only Isabella's life but his as well. Dante left the orphanage with more questions than answers, but one certainty began to form in his mind. He needed to investigate his father's last months of life with the same meticulousness that he applied to his legal cases. Back at the law office, he shared with two partners. He locked his office door and called Martha, Sebastian's personal secretary for 15 years. Martha, I need you to come to my office this afternoon. It's about my father and some activities he may have kept secret. Mr. Mendez, Martha's voice trembled slightly. I already imagined you'd want to talk about this. The secretary's tone confirmed Dante's suspicions. She knew something. So, you're aware of his visits to the orphanage? Yes, sir, and about much more than that. 2 hours later, Martha Santos, 52, a woman of simple but efficient appearance, was sitting in the leather armchair in front of Dante's desk. Her grey hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and she held a black folder in her lap as if it were a protective shield. Martha, you worked with my father for 15 years. I trust your discretion and loyalty. Now I need you to tell me everything about these visits to the orphanage. Martha took a deep breath before beginning. Mr. Mendez, your father asked me to keep many things secret over the past 5 years. He said it was to protect you from unnecessary complications while you built your career. What kind of complications? The investigations into the family of the girl Isabella. Your father spent a considerable amount hiring private detectives to find out about her background. Dante leaned forward. Detectives? Why? Because he suspected that Isabella wasn't just any child. From the first time he saw her, he was obsessed with the physical similarities. The green eyes, the birthmark on her left wrist. What birthmark? Martha opened the folder and took out an enlarged photo. It was an image of Isabella's wrist, clearly showing a small crescent moon-shaped mark. The same mark that you have and that your father had, the Mendes mark. Dante automatically looked at his own wrist, where the same mark had been the subject of jokes in childhood. Sebastian always said it was a sign that he truly belonged to the family. Feeling that an unknown child shared this particularity was disturbing, but that could be a coincidence. Your father thought so too at first. But then other coincidences started. Isabella's precocious intelligence, the way she hummed specific melodies that no one had taught her, melodies that your mother Evangelina used to sing. The name of his mother struck Dante like lightning. Evangelina had left Harmony Creek when he was 17 after a terrible argument with Sebastian about something that was never clearly explained to Dante. She had simply disappeared one night, leaving only a cold letter saying goodbye and asking not to be searched for. My mother, what does she have to do with this? Your father began to suspect that Isabella could be... Martha hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Could be what, Martha? Evangelina's daughter. Your sister. Dante's world seemed to stop. He got up abruptly, walking to the window overlooking Harmony Creek's main street. The possibility was absurd, but at the same time, it would explain so many things. His father's obsessive interest in Isabella, the significant expenses for her care, the secret investigation. That's impossible. My mother would have... She would have told me if she had another child. Mr. Mendes, Evangelina left home pregnant. Dante turned quickly. How do you know that? Because I helped her with the medical exams at the time. Her father didn't know. She asked me for absolute secrecy, said she was going to tell him at the right time, but they argued before she had the courage. What did they argue about? Martha lowered her eyes. About another man. Evangelina became involved with someone after some problems in her marriage with your father. When Sebastian found out, he kicked her out of the house immediately. Dante felt as if he were assembling a macabre puzzle. His mother had left home pregnant by another man, and now his father suspected that an orphan child could be her daughter. And you believe this theory. Your father believed it, so much so that he was trying to locate Evangelina in recent weeks. He wanted to confront her with his suspicions. Was he able to find her? I don't know, sir. He was very reserved about it in recent days, but he was visibly anxious, almost desperate. Dante returned to his chair, trying to process all the information. If Martha was right, if Isabella was really his sister, it would change everything. Not only would it explain his father's obsession with the girl, but it would also create a family responsibility that he wasn't prepared to take on. Martha, I need to see all the documents related to these investigations. Paid bills, detective. Reports, everything. They're in the safe in your father's office. But, sir, she hesitated again. What else? There's something about the orphanage that you need to know. Your father's donations weren't just for Isabella. He was practically supporting the institution alone. And now that he's no longer. Here the orphanage will close, Dante completed, understanding the implication. Karen didn't want to worry you yesterday, but they have resources for 2 more weeks, at most. After that, the children will be transferred to other institutions. Dante thought of Isabella being taken away, losing the only home she knew. The image of the girl crying at the wake, calling Sebastian grandpa, returned to his mind with renewed force. How much did my father spend monthly on the orphanage? About $15,000, sir. Between direct donations, medications for Isabella, and improvements to the structure. It was a significant amount, but not impossible to maintain. The problem was that taking on this responsibility would mean getting definitively involved in Isabella's life and in all the mystery surrounding her. That night, Dante drove to his father's house, an old but well-maintained building in downtown Harmony Creek. Using the keys that Sebastian had given him years ago, he entered the private office, an environment that had always been forbidden during his childhood. Safe was hidden behind a family portrait, a photo of the three of them together taken shortly before Evangelina left. Dante entered the combination, which he knew was his date of birth, and the safe opened, revealing meticulously organized folders. The first folder contained payment receipts to a private investigation agency. The amounts were high and the payments regular, dating back to the last 2 years. The second folder had detailed reports on attempts to locate Evangelina Santos Mendez in various cities in the state. But it was the third folder that made Dante sit heavily in his father's chair. It contained surveillance photos of a woman he recognized immediately, even after all these years. Evangelina, his mother, leaving a small medical clinic, carrying a baby in her arms. The date in the corner of the photo was exactly 5 years. Ego tut, on the back of the photo, a note in Sebastian's handwriting. Evangelina leaves baby at Sunny Meadows Orphanage, March 15th. Investigate paternity. Dante looked at the date again. March 15th, exactly 2 days before Isabella had been found at the orphanage door. His hands trembled as he searched for more evidence, more photos, more confirmations of what already seemed obvious. On the last page of the folder, he found a handwritten letter, apparently a draft that Sebastian never got to send. Evangelina, after 20 years, I finally found you, and I also found the daughter you hid from me. I need to know the truth about Isabella. Is she my granddaughter? Why did you abandon her? Why did you deny me the right to know her? I await your reply, as I do not intend to take this secret to the grave. Dante let the letter fall onto the desk. Sebastian had discovered the truth about Isabella shortly before his sudden passing, and now he, Dante, was alone to deal with the consequences of this discovery. The following days were a whirlwind of revelations that left Dante increasingly obsessed with the truth. He had hired the same detective that his father used, Roberto Silva, an experienced 45-year-old man who knew every detail of the previous investigation. The meeting took place in a discreet coffee shop on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, away from the curious eyes of the small town. Mr. Mendez, your father was very close to finding definitive answers, Roberto said, flipping through a notebook filled with notes. In the last 3 months, he intensified the search for Evangelina. He was sure she was hiding something important. Were you able to locate her? We managed to track her down to Meadowbrook, where she works as a nurse in a rural clinic under the name Eva Santos. She only changed her first name, kept her maiden name. Dante felt his heart race. His mother was alive, working just 2 hours away. After 20 years of silence, he could finally have answers. There's something else your father discovered in the last week before what happened, Roberto continued. Evangelina didn't just have one daughter. She had twins. The world seemed to stop around Dante. Twins? That's right. And one of them was given up for adoption in Riverside to a family called the Millers. Your father was trying to confirm if Isabella was really one of the twins when he had the heart attack, Dante completed, now understanding that the discovery of this truth may have been the trigger for his father's sudden death. Roberto confirmed with a grave nod. Sebastian was very shaken in the last weeks. He said he couldn't sleep well, that he felt like his whole life had been a lie. Dante paid the detective and asked for all the investigation files. He drove back home, with his mind buzzing with possibilities and fears. If Isabella really was his sister, he would have not just one, but 2 unknown sisters. And more importantly, how to deal with Isabella knowing this? The next day, he returned to the orphanage. Karen greeted him with a worried expression that Dante had learned to recognize. It meant urgent financial problems. Mr. Mendez, I need to be direct with you. We received an official notice today. If we can't pay the overdue bills by the end of this week, the orphanage will be officially closed. How much do you owe? $42,000. Between suppliers, late employee salaries, and the electricity bill that's been outstanding for 3 months, Dante did mental calculations quickly. It was an amount he could cover, but it would mean using practically all of his personal savings. And more than that, it would mean officially assuming the responsibility that his father had carried in secret. And Isabella, how is she handling all of this? Badly. She refuses to eat properly, doesn't play with the other children, and spends the whole day looking out the window as if she expects Sebastian to appear at any moment. Dante asked to see her. He found Isabella sitting in the small inner courtyard, drawing on the ground with a twig. When he approached, he saw that she was tracing shapes that looked like houses and human figures. "What are you drawing, Isabella?" "My family," she replied without looking up. "Grandpa Sebastian, me, and—" She hesitated, looking at Dante. "Maybe. You if you want to be part of it." The innocence of the child contrasted painfully with the complexity of the situation. Dante crouched down beside her, watching the rudimentary drawing. "Isabella, do you remember anything from before you came here? From the woman who brought you?" The girl stopped drawing and looked at him with those green eyes that were like mirrors of his own. "Sometimes I have dreams about a lady who cried. A lot. She sang a sad song to me, but I can't remember the words. What was that song like? Can you hum it?" Isabella began to hum a melody that made Dante stand completely still. It was a lullaby that Evangelina used to sing to him when he was little, a melody that his mother said had been passed down from generation to generation in her family. "Where did you learn that song, Isabella?" "I didn't learn it. It's always been in my head. Grandpa Sebastian got emotional when I sang it. He said it reminded him of someone very important to him." Dante felt a shiver run down his spine. Each new piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Isabella was really his sister. "Mr. Mendez," Karen's voice interrupted his thoughts. "There's a gentleman here wanting to speak with you. Says he's a lawyer." Dante got up, asking Isabella to continue playing. In Karen's office, he found a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Dr. Frank Davis, legal representative of a family in Riverside. "Mr. Mendez, I represent the Miller family, who legally adopted a child 5 years ago. We learned about the investigations your father was conducting about twins abandoned in orphanages in the region. And what does that have to do with me? Our client, Amy Miller, now 6 years old, has recently begun to show an unusual interest in finding a possible twin sister. The family is willing to pay for DNA tests to confirm if there is a relationship with the girl who lives in this orphanage." Dante felt as if he was being dragged into an increasingly complex whirlpool. Now he not only had to deal with the possibility of Isabella being his sister, but also with a family that might be looking for her. And if the test confirms the relationship, the Miller family would like to establish contact between the girls. They have the resources to help with Isabella's medical care and are interested in eventual joint adoption, if that is in the best interest of the children. Dante's head began to ache. Joint adoption would mean that Isabella would be taken to Riverside, away from him, to a family that could offer everything he couldn't: emotional stability, a traditional family structure, and unlimited resources. For her medical care, "I need to think about it," Dante said, feeling overwhelmed. "Of course, but Mr. Mendez, there's a detail that might be important for your decision. Amy has the same heart condition as the girl here, and the same birthmark on her wrist." After the lawyer left, Dante sat in Karen's office in absolute silence. All the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, inexorably, but the end result was more frightening than he had imagined. "Karen, you said that when Isabella arrived here, she was sick. Very sick. She almost didn't survive the first few weeks. But there was something else." She cried, calling out for Amy, as if she were looking for someone. "Amy." Dante repeated softly. Amy Miller, the twin sister who had grown up in Riverside while Isabella languished in an orphanage. That night, Dante made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the phone and called Roberto, the detective. Roberto, I want you to set up a meeting with Evangelina. I don't care if she doesn't want to talk to me. I need answers, and I need them now. Mr. Mendez, your mother may not react well to a direct confrontation. Then it won't be a confrontation. It'll be a conversation between a mother and a son about a child who may be suffering because of secrets kept for too many years. And if she refuses to talk? Dante looked out the window of his house in the direction where the orphanage was located. Somewhere in that faded yellow building, a 6-year-old girl was sleeping, possibly dreaming of a grandfather who would never return and a family she never knew she had. Then I'll have to find another way to discover the truth. Because Isabella deserves to know who she really is. And I need to know if I have a sister that I spent 6 years ignoring while she grew up abandoned just a few miles away. The meeting with Evangelina was scheduled for the following Saturday at a small coffee shop in Meadowbrook. Dante arrived half an hour early, nervous as he hadn't felt since his college days. 20 years without seeing his mother. 20 years of unanswered questions, of unresolved grievances, of an absence that had shaped his cautious and controlling personality. When Evangelina entered the coffee shop, Dante needed a few seconds to recognize her. The elegant and vibrant woman of his memories had given way to a 58-year-old lady, her hair completely grey and tied in a simple ponytail, wearing a blue nurse's uniform. But the green eyes were the same eyes that he saw in the mirror every day, the same that Isabella possessed. "Dante," she said simply, sitting down across from him without showing emotion. "You've grown a lot." "Mom." The word came out harsher than he intended. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. When the detective said you wanted to talk about a child from the orphanage, I knew this day would come sooner or later." Evangelina ordered only a black coffee. "Your father found out, didn't he?" "Found out what exactly?" Dante tested, wanting to hear the confession directly from her. Evangelina sighed deeply, seeming to carry the weight of years of secret. "About Isabella, about the twins I abandoned." Hearing the confirmation directly from his mother's mouth was like receiving a punch to the stomach. Dante leaned forward. "Why, Mom? Why didn't you ever tell me that I had sisters? Because at the time when I left home, you chose to stay with your father. You chose his side in that terrible argument. I was pregnant, desperate, and my own son judged me as your father did." The accusation hit Dante hard. He remembered the argument, Sebastian's accusations of betrayal, the coldness with which he had treated his mother in the last days before she left. At the time, at 17, it had been easier to accept the paternal version that Evangelina was to blame for everything. "I was just a confused teenager," Dante defended himself. "I didn't understand the complexity of the situation." "And now you understand?" Evangelina stared at him harshly. "Now that you've discovered that one of those girls grew up in an orphanage, while you lived comfortably with the inheritance that your father built, tell me everything, from the beginning." Evangelina stirred nervously in her cup before beginning. "After you were born, my marriage with Sebastian began to deteriorate. He was obsessed with business, increasingly cold, more distant. I felt invisible in my own house. Then I met Charles, the father of the twins. Charles was a doctor at the clinic where I had my routine checkups. He was kind. He listened to me. He made me feel important again. The relationship started as friendship and evolved into something more. When I found out I was pregnant, Charles had already moved to another state for professional reasons. And you couldn't contact him?" "I tried, but he had already married someone else. I didn't want to create problems in his life." Evangelina paused, her eyes filling with tears. "When Sebastian found out about the pregnancy and about Charles. He kicked me out of the house immediately. He said I had dishonored the Mendez family. Dante vaguely remembered that terrible night, the shouts, the accusations, the coldness of Sebastian ordering Evangelina to leave and never come back. At the time, he had supported his father, convinced that his mother was the villain of the story. And the girls? I had nowhere to go, Dante. No money, no support, pregnant with twins who were born premature and with health problems. Amy was born stronger, but Isabella almost didn't survive the first days. Why didn't you contact me? I could have helped. Evangelina laughed bitterly. You? You looked me in the eyes on the night I was kicked out and said I deserved all of that for having betrayed your father. You were 17, but your words were the ones that hurt me the most. Dante felt a deep pain in his chest. He didn't remember exactly having said that, but he knew his stubborn personality from adolescence. It was quite possible that he had uttered cruel words that he had forgotten, but that marked his mother forever. So you gave Amy up for adoption and Isabella to the orphanage. It wasn't that simple. Evangelina wiped her tears. In the first months, I tried to take care of both of them alone. I lived in a miserable rented room, working as a cleaning lady to pay for their medications. But the medical bills were too expensive, and I couldn't give the attention that 2 sick babies needed. Then, a wealthy family from Riverside became interested in Amy. They offered complete medical care, quality education, a life that I could never provide. I gave her up first, thinking that I could stabilize myself and take better care of Isabella. But you couldn't. Isabella got even sicker after Amy left. It was as if she felt the absence of her sister. She cried constantly, didn't eat properly. I worked from morning to night trying to pay for her treatment, but it wasn't enough. Dante imagined his young mother, desperate, trying alone to care for a seriously ill baby. The image contrasted cruelly with his memories of a spoiled teenager who had never faced real difficulties. That's when you took her to the orphanage. It was the most difficult decision of my life, but I thought it would be temporary, that when I stabilized financially, I would come back to get her. Evangelina sobbed. But the years passed, and every time I gathered the courage to return, I thought she would be better off without me, that she had formed bonds with other people. She did, with Dad, I know. When Sebastian started investigating, when he found out where I lived, I knew he had found Isabella. And I also knew that he was taking care of her in a way that I never managed. You knew about his visits to the orphanage? In recent months, yes. He called me a few times, but I always hung up. I didn't have the courage to face him. Evangelina paused. Until he called me last week. Dante leaned forward. What did he say? That he had discovered the truth about Isabella, that she was his granddaughter. He said he wanted to make things right, that he was willing to forgive me if I came home and assumed my responsibility. With the girl. And what was your response? I said I needed to think, that 20 years of resentment aren't resolved in a phone call. Evangelina looked directly into Dante's eyes. 2 days later, I found out he had died. The silence that followed was loaded with guilt and regret. Dante realized that his father's sudden death may have been precipitated by the emotional tension of all this discovery, by the urgency to resolve a complex family situation that had dragged on for 2 decades. Mom, Isabella needs you now. The orphanage is going to close. She may be separated from everything she knows. And I need her too, Evangelina interrupted. Dante, not a day goes by without me thinking about my daughters. Without me regretting having made the decisions I made, but I'm afraid. Afraid of what? That it's too late, that Isabella will reject me, that you will reject me again. She paused, and mainly afraid of not being able to be the mother that she deserves after all these years of absence. Dante reached out over the table and gently touched his mother's hand, the first physical contact between them in 20 years. Mom, all make mistakes. The important thing is what we do from now on. Do you forgive me for having left, for having abandoned you? I forgive you if you forgive me for having been such an insensitive son back then." Evangelina smiled for the first time since arriving at the coffee shop. "Then how about we meet this girl together who may give us a second chance to be a family?" When they left the coffee shop, Dante knew that his life had changed completely. Once again, he had not only reunited with his mother but also discovered that he had two sisters. And now, for the first time in years, he felt that perhaps he could build something good from so much suffering. The meeting between Evangelina and Isabella was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at the orphanage. Dante had spent the previous night sleepless, imagining what the girl's reaction would be when she discovered that her biological mother was alive and wanted to meet her. Karen had prepared the visiting room with special care, placing fresh flowers and organizing some toys to make the environment more welcoming. When Evangelina arrived, her hands trembled visibly. She carried a small suitcase with gifts, some storybooks, homemade sweets that she had made in the early morning, and a rag doll that she herself had sewn years ago, thinking of the daughters she had lost. "Dante, what if she doesn't like me? What if she blames me for abandoning her?" Evangelina whispered nervously while they waited for Karen to fetch Isabella. "Mom, she's a child. Children have a capacity for forgiveness that we adults lose over time." Dante tried to reassure her, but he himself was anxious. When Isabella appeared at the door, there was a moment of absolute silence. The girl looked at Evangelina with curiosity, tilting her head as she did when she was trying to solve a puzzle. Evangelina, in turn, covered her mouth with her hands, fighting back tears as she saw the daughter she had abandoned 6 years ago. "You're the lady from my dreams," said Isabella suddenly, taking a few timid steps towards Evangelina. "The one who cried and sang that sad song." Evangelina knelt down to be at the girl's level. "You remember me?" "A little bit. You used to hold me in your arms and cry a lot. I didn't understand why you were always sad." Isabella paused, studying. Evangelina's face. "Are you my real mother?" "I am, my little one. I'm your mother." Evangelina extended her arms hesitantly, and to everyone's surprise, Isabella walked to her and allowed herself to be embraced. The hug lasted several minutes, mother and daughter reconnecting in a way that seemed simultaneously natural and surreal. Dante watched the scene with a mixture of emotion and relief. Perhaps it wasn't too late to rebuild the family ties. "Why did you leave?" asked Isabella when she finally pulled away from the hug. "Grandpa Sebastian said my mother had gone to heaven. But you're here." Evangelina looked at Dante, seeking help on how to explain such a complex situation to a 6-year-old child. "My darling, I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I was very sad and sick, and I thought you would be better off with other people taking care of you. But I always missed you," said Isabella, with a sincerity that broke the hearts of everyone present. "Sometimes I dreamed that you came back to get me, and now I'm back. If you want, I can stay close to you from now on." Isabella looked at Dante and then at Karen. "But what about Grandpa Sebastian? He said he would always take care of me." "Grandpa Sebastian went to heaven, remember? But before he left, he asked me to take care of you," Dante said, improvising a gentler version of the truth. "And will you take care of me too?" Isabella asked Evangelina. "I will, if you let me, and maybe we can become a real family." During the next hour, Evangelina told stories about when Isabella was a baby, showed old photos that she had kept, and sang the lullabies that the girl recognized from her fragments of memory. It was a moment of healing and reconnection that seemed almost magical, but reality set in when Karen discreetly called Dante for a private conversation in the hallway. "Mr. Mendez, I received a call early this morning. The Miller family from Riverside wants to bring Amy to meet Isabella next week. They have confirmed through medical tests that the girls are really twins." Dante felt his stomach clench. "And what exactly does that mean?" It means we'll have to deal with an even more complex situation. Amy grew up in a structured family with resources, education. The Millers are good people, but they're concerned about the well-being of both girls. Concerned how? They know about Isabella's medical condition and want to help, but they also know about the precarious situation of the orphanage. They're proposing a joint adoption, taking Isabella to live with them and Amy in Riverside. The proposal was like a stab in Dante's chest. He had just reunited with his mother, discovered he had a sister, and now he could lose her to an unknown. A family that could offer everything he couldn't. What if I adopt Isabella, legally, as an older brother? Mr. Mendez, you're single, you work a lot, you don't have experience with children. In a legal dispute, a structured family would have the advantage. Karen spoke delicately, but the truth was harsh. What if it wasn't just me? What if my mother came back to Harmony Creek and we raised Isabella together? That would change everything, but your mother would have to prove financial and emotional stability. After 20 years of absence, it would be a long and complicated process. Dante returned to the visiting room with his head buzzing with possibilities and problems. He found Evangelina and Isabella playing with the rag doll, both laughing at something Isabella had invented about the doll's story. "Mom, I need to talk to you," Dante said, interrupting the game. In the orphanage yard, away from curious ears, Dante explained the situation about the Miller family and the threat of losing Isabella. Evangelina turned pale. "Are you saying I can lose my daughter again, now that I've finally found her? Not if we do things right. But you'd have to come back to Harmony Creek, get a job, prove that you can take care of her properly." "I would do that. I would do anything for her." Evangelina paused. "But Dante, there's something you need to know. Something that may complicate our situation even further. What now? I don't just have Isabella and Amy. There are other children." Dante felt as if the ground was collapsing under his feet again. "Other children? How many?" "2. A 15-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. Children from my current relationship." Evangelina lowered her eyes. "I remarried 10 years ago. My husband doesn't know about the twins." The revelation was devastating. Not only had Dante discovered that he had 2 sisters, but also that he had 2 other half-siblings. And even more complicated, Evangelina had a current family that completely ignored the existence of Isabella. "Mom, how do you intend to explain to your husband that you have 2 6-year-old daughters that he never knew existed?" "I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. When I built my new life, I tried to forget the painful past. I never told them about the twins, about the mistakes I made." Evangelina started to cry. "Now I realize that I was just postponing the moment to face the truth." "And your other children? How would they react to discovering that they have older sisters?" "Michael and Sophia are good kids, but it would be a huge shock for them too." Dante walked a few steps, trying to process all the information. The family he thought he was rebuilding was actually even more complex than he had imagined, and each new revelation brought new obstacles to keeping Isabella close to them. "We have a week before the Miller family visits," he said finally. "A week to decide how we're going to deal with this whole situation. What if I can't solve everything in time? What if we lose Isabella again?" Dante looked through the window to where Isabella was playing alone in the yard, humming the song that Evangelina had taught her. The girl seemed happier than he had ever seen her, finally having found her biological mother. "Then we'll have to fight, because now that I know she's my sister, I won't let her be separated from us again, no matter what it costs." But deep down, Dante knew that the battle that was approaching would be the most difficult of his life. It wasn't just about legal or financial issues, but about a complex war involving multiple families, secrets buried for decades, and the future of a girl who had suffered too much in her few years of life. The week that followed was a whirlwind of desperate preparations. Dante had made a drastic decision. He would use all his savings to pay off the debts of the orphanage, buying time to resolve the family situation. $42,000 meant practically all his emergency reserve, but he couldn't imagine Isabella being transferred to another place just when she was starting to rebuild ties with the family. "Mr. Mendez, are you sure about this?" asked Karen when he showed up on Monday with the money. "That's a very large amount to spend on an institution that isn't even yours." "Isabella is my sister Karen, and this place is the only home she knows. I can't let it be closed now." Meanwhile, Evangelina had returned to Meadowbrook with the impossible mission of telling her husband, Mark Silver, about her previous life. Mark was a simple, honest man who worked as an electronics technician and believed he completely knew the woman he had married 10 years ago. The conversation took place on a Thursday night after the younger children, 15-year-old Michael and 12-year-old Sophia, had gone to sleep. Mark was watching television when Evangelina turned off the device and sat next to him on the worn sofa in the living room. "Mark, I need to tell you about a part of my life that I've always kept secret." "What kind of secret, Eva?" Mark knew her by the name she had adopted and used a cautious tone of voice, as if he sensed that he wouldn't like what he was about to hear. "Before I met you, I was married. I had another name, Evangelina Mendez, and I had children that I abandoned." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark stared at her as if he were seeing a stranger. "Children? How many children?" "3. A 35-year-old man named Dante, and 2 6-year-old twin girls, Isabella and Amy." Mark got up abruptly from the sofa. "You have 3 children that I didn't." "No existed. Howsoever, or rather Evangelina, I couldn't talk about it. It was too painful. When we met, I was trying to rebuild my life, forget the past." "Forget? You forgot you had children." Mark's voice rose in tone, waking Michael, who appeared at the top of the stairs in pajamas. "Dad, what's going on? Why are you shouting?" "Go. Back to your room, Michael. It's adult stuff." But Michael, with the typical curiosity of 15 years, stayed listening behind the wall of the stairs. Sophia soon joined him, both trying to understand why their parents were arguing so intensely. "Mark, let me explain all the context. What context justifies a woman hiding from her children and husband that she has 3 other children? What kind of person are you, Ava? A person who made terrible mistakes and spent 20 years trying to live with them." Evangelina started to cry. "But now one of my daughters needs me. She's in an orphanage, sick, and may be taken away if I don't assume my responsibility. And what do you expect me to do? To welcome with open arms 3 stepchildren who appear out of nowhere? I hope you understand that I need to do what's right, even if it's 20 years too late." Mark paced the small room like a caged animal. "And our children? Michael and Sophia? How am I going to explain to them that they have siblings that their mother abandoned, that the woman they admire is capable of abandoning children?" Mark's words were like knives in Evangelina's heart. She knew she deserved every accusation, every word of anger, but she also knew she couldn't abandon Isabella again. "I'm going to Harmony Creek at the end of the week to try to resolve the situation. If you can't forgive me, I'll understand. And if I say I don't accept it, that you have to choose between this family and those children you abandoned." The question echoed through the house like a sentence. Michael and Sophia, listening behind the wall, exchanged confused and scared glances. They had never seen their parents argue like that, and discovering that they had unknown siblings was too disturbing to process. Meanwhile, in Harmony Creek, Dante received a call that would further complicate the situation. It was Dr. Frank Davis, the lawyer of the Miller family. "Mr. Mendez, there's a complication. Amy is very anxious to meet Isabella, but her parents have discovered some details about the financial situation of the biological family that worry them." "What kind of details?" They learned about the orphanage almost closing, about the instability of the biological mother, about the fact that you spent your savings to keep the institution running. They're questioning whether this is really the best environment for Amy to maintain contact. They want to cancel the meeting? Not exactly, but they want it to be in a more controlled situation. They're proposing that Isabella go to Riverside to spend a weekend with them so that the girls can meet in a stable environment. Dante felt a shiver of fear run down his spine. And what if they decide they don't want to return Isabella? Mister, they are serious people, with a reputation to uphold. They wouldn't do anything illegal. But, well, if they can prove they have, better conditions to raise the two girls together. The threat was clear. The Miller family had resources, stability, and now a girl who was Isabella's twin sister. In any legal dispute, they would have an overwhelming advantage over a single brother and a mother who had abandoned her daughters 20 years ago. That night, Dante went to the orphanage to talk to Isabella about the possibility of meeting Amy. He found the girl in her room, drawing in a notebook that Evangelina had brought her. "What are you drawing, Isabella?" "A big family," she replied, showing a drawing with several figures. "Look, here are me and Amy. Here are you. Here's Mom Eva, and here are Michael and Sophia." Dante was surprised. "You know about Michael and Sophia?" "Mom Eva told me that I have other siblings too. She said they are a little older than me and that they live with her." Isabella paused. "Do you think they'll like me?" The innocence of the question broke Dante's heart. Isabella was creating fantasies about a big, united family, without understanding the complexity and tensions that surrounded the whole situation. "Isabella, maybe you'll have a chance to meet Amy this weekend. She lives with a very nice family. In Riverside, Amy is my twin sister, right? Mom Eva said we're almost the same." "That's right. You were born on the same day. You look a lot alike. And after I meet her, will we be able to play together always?" Dante didn't know how to respond. If the Miller family decided it was better to raise the twins together, Isabella could be taken away definitively. But if he denied the meeting, it might seem like he was trying to hide something. "Let's see how the meeting goes first, okay?" That night, Dante called Evangelina and told her about the Miller family's proposal. Her response was immediate. "No, absolutely not. I just reunited with my daughter. I won't allow her to be taken to spend the weekend with strangers, even if they are the adoptive parents of her sister. Mom, if we refuse, they'll think we have something to hide. They can use that against us in a legal dispute. What if I go with her? What if I accompany Isabella to Riverside? Did you resolve the situation with Mark?" There was a long pause. "No. He gave me an ultimatum. Either I choose this family, or I choose you. I can't have both. And what is your choice?" "Dante, I've spent 20 years running away from my responsibilities. I won't abandon Isabella again. If that means losing Mark, and maybe even Michael and Sophia," her voice failed, "then at least I'll do one thing right in my life." After hanging up the phone, Dante was thinking about the irony of the situation. His mother was willing to sacrifice one family to save another, and he was spending all his financial security to keep a girl he barely knew close to him. Everyone was making desperate choices, with no guarantee that they would work out. The question he didn't want to ask, but that was always present in his mind was, what if the Miller family really was the best option for Isabella? What if all this suffering and sacrifice was just delaying a decision that would be inevitable? The weekend arrived loaded with tension. Evangelina had returned to Harmony, Greek on Friday, bringing only a small suitcase and eyes swollen from crying so much. Mark had fulfilled his threat. She would have to choose between the two families, and her choice had resulted in a separation that seemed definitive. Michael and Sophia didn't understand, she told Dante while they were having coffee at the small inn where she was staying. They looked at me as if I were a stranger. Sophia asked if I was going to abandon them someday too. And Mark? Mark said I can come back when I resolve this madness and decide to be a real mother and wife. But he also said that if I bring any child home, he will leave and take Michael and Sophia with him. The pain on Evangelina's face was evident. She had exchanged one family for another, with no guarantees that she would be able to keep either of them together. The Miller family arrived in Harmony Creek on Saturday morning in a luxurious silver van. Richard Miller, 42, was a successful businessman in the pharmaceutical sector, tall and elegant, with the type of presence that commanded respect. His wife, Patricia, 38, was a pediatrician, a woman of soft speech but sharp eyes, who immediately catalogued every detail of the orphanage environment. But it was Amy who made the biggest impact. When she got out of the van, Karen had to lean against the wall. The resemblance to Isabella was disturbing. The same green eyes, the same face shape, even the gestures were similar. The only notable difference was that Amy was visibly healthier, well-fed, and wearing expensive and well-cared-for clothes. "My God," whispered Evangelina when she saw the daughter she had given up for adoption. "She's so different." Amy was holding Patricia's hand firmly, but her eyes scanned the orphanage environment with curiosity mixed with discomfort. It was obvious she had never seen a place so simple and worn. "Where's my sister?" she asked, with a clear and well-articulated, the result of years of privileged education. Isabella appeared at the door, wearing her best dress, a simple but clean piece that Evangelina had bought for her. The meeting between the twins was magical and painful at the same time. They looked at each other in silence for several seconds, as if they were seeing a reflection of themselves. "You look just like me," said Isabella finally, approaching slowly. "I dreamed about you," replied Amy, letting go of Patricia's hand for the first time. "In my dreams, you were always crying." The two girls hugged instinctively, and for a few moments it seemed that 6 years of separation simply disappeared. But it soon became evident that despite the physical similarity, they were very different children. Amy talked about piano lessons, language courses, family trips, and expensive toys. Isabella listened in silence, sometimes asking what words Amy used naturally meant. The difference in opportunities and education created a painful gap between the sisters. "Amy is learning French and Spanish," Patricia said proudly to Evangelina, "and she has an impressive aptitude for mathematics. Doctors say her heart condition is completely controlled with proper treatment." The sentence had an implicit criticism that did not go unnoticed by anyone. While Amy received multilingual education and top-notch medical care, Isabella could barely read simple sentences and depended on donated medications. Richard watched everything with a calculating look. "Mr. Mendez, can we talk in private?" In the orphanage yard, away from the girls, Richard got straight to the point. "We know that you spent your savings to keep this place running. We also know that the biological mother just abandoned another family to come to care for Isabella. So what? That demonstrates emotional and financial instability. In any official assessment, it would be considered an inadequate environment for raising children." Dante felt the anger grow in his chest. "And what do you propose? A solution that benefits everyone, especially the girls. We adopt Isabella too. She receives the same medical and educational care as Amy. The sisters grow up together, and you can visit them regularly. You want to buy my sister? It's not buying. It's offering her the opportunities that you can't provide." Richard paused. "Look at Amy and look at Isabella. One is healthy, educated, happy. The other is sick, educationally behind, traumatized. What future can you really offer her?" Richard's words were cruel, but they had an implacable logic that Dante couldn't completely refute. The difference between the twins was glaring, and it resulted directly from the opportunities that each had received. When they returned inside, they found a scene that broke everyone's hearts. Amy was trying to teach Isabella to write her own name, which the girl from the orphanage still didn't fully master. Amy's patience and gentleness contrasted with Isabella's visible frustration at not being able to keep up. "Why don't you know how to write?" asked Amy innocently. "It's easy." "No one taught me right," replied Isabella, clearly embarrassed. "My parents can teach you. They're very smart." Patricia intervened delicately. "Amy, honey, not all children have the same opportunities that you've had." It was then that something unexpected happened. Evangelina, who had been watching in silence, approached the girls and knelt between them. "Isabella, do you want to learn to write better?" "I do, Mom Eva." "Then I'll teach you. Every day from now on, we'll study together." Amy looked at Evangelina with curiosity. "Are you her real mother?" "I'm the real mother of both of you," replied Evangelina in a firm voice. "And I know that I made terrible mistakes in the past, but now I'm going to do everything right." Richard and Patricia exchanged meaningful glances. Evangelina's statement had changed the whole dynamic of the situation. They were no longer dealing with just an orphaned child, but with a biological mother determined to reassume her responsibilities. "Mrs. Evangelina," said Patricia carefully, "we understand your position, but Amy has had a family for 6 years. She calls us Mom and Dad. We can't simply ignore those bonds. And I'm not asking you to ignore them. I'm asking you to give me the chance to raise my other daughter properly. With what resources? With what structure?" Richard's question was tough, but necessary. It was Dante who answered. "I'm going to help. I'm going to make sure Isabella has quality education, medical care, everything she needs." "And how? You spent your savings keeping a failing orphanage afloat. You work as a lawyer in a small town. You have no experience with children or emotional stability for that." "Then I'll learn," said Dante with a determination that surprised even himself. "I'll do whatever's necessary." Amy, who had been following the tense discussion of the adults, suddenly got up and went to Isabella. "Do you want to come live with me? My room is really big. We can share it." Isabella looked at Evangelina, then at Dante, clearly confused. "But I want to stay close to Mom Eva and Brother Dante. They can visit always," insisted Amy. "And you'll have cool toys, and you'll learn a lot of things." "But this is my home. This house is going to close," said Amy, with the innocent cruelty of children. "Mom, Patricia said the place is broken." The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Isabella looked at Karen, seeking confirmation or denial. Karen lowered her eyes, unable to lie. "Is it true?" asked Isabella to Dante. "Our house is going to close." "No, I won't let that happen. But what if you can't take care of me right? What if I get sick again?" The question revealed Isabella's deep fears. Fear of being abandoned again, fear of being a burden to the people she loved. Richard realized the girl's vulnerability and took advantage of the moment. "Isabella, if you come with us, you'll never have to worry about that again. You'll always have good food, medicine when you need it. And mainly, you'll always have your sister by your side." Amy took Isabella's hand. "It'll be fun. We can be a real family." Dante watched the scene with growing despair. Logic was on the side of the Miller family, and even Isabella seemed to be being convinced. How to compete with promises of security, education, and a twin sister when all he could offer were good intentions and limited resources. It was then that he made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't let them take Isabella without a real fight, even if it meant facing a legal battle that he could lose. Dante's decision to legally fight for Isabella's custody triggered a series of events that no one had predicted. On the Monday following the meeting with the Miller family, he hired Regina Campos, a family law specialist from Riverside, known for winning impossible cases. "Mr. Mendez, I'll be honest with you," said Regina during the first consultation in her modern office. "This case is extremely complex. We have a biological mother who abandoned her daughters and just destroyed another marriage, a single brother with no experience with children and a structured adoptive family that can offer everything that you can't. But there's something they can't offer. What? Isabella is a Mendez. She has a biological family that is finally willing to take responsibility for her. Regina leafed through the documents that Dante had brought. Have the DNA tests confirmed the relationship? We haven't done them officially yet, but all the evidence points to that. The birthmark, the physical similarities, the fact that my mother confirmed that Isabella is her daughter. We need those tests. Without scientific proof, everything is just speculation. Regina made notes. And there's another problem. I discovered that the Miller family has already filed an emergency temporary guardianship petition. Dante felt the blood run cold. What do you mean? They claimed that Isabella is at risk in the orphanage, that the institution is financially unstable, and that the child needs specialized medical care that only they can provide. That's a lie. I paid all the debts of the orphanage, but it didn't solve the structural problem. The orphanage continues to depend on donations. It has no long-term sustainability. A judge may consider that as an inadequate environment. Dante left the lawyer's office with the feeling that he was fighting windmills. Every solution he found created two new problems. He drove straight to the orphanage, where he found Karen visibly nervous. Mr. Mendez, I'm glad you arrived. We had a visit from social services this morning. They came to assess Isabella's conditions here. And how was it? Well, considering the circumstances. But they asked a lot of questions about financial stability, about the future plans of the institution, about your mother's ability to take care of a child with special needs. Where's Isabella now? In her room, playing with some younger girls. She's been different since the meeting with Amy. Dante found Isabella sitting on a small bed, braiding the hair of a 4-year-old girl. She smiled when she saw him, but there was a sadness in her eyes that wasn't there before. Hi, Brother Dante, did you come to play with me? I did, yes. How are you feeling? Isabella thought for a moment before answering. Confused. Amy is very nice, but she has things I've never seen. And she knows how to do things I don't know. Does that make you sad? A little. If I went to live with her, would I become smart? Like her? The question revealed the deep insecurity that the meeting with her twin sister had awakened in Isabella. For the first time, she had a direct mirror of what her life could have been in different circumstances. Isabella, you're already smart. You just need someone to teach you things, like Mom Eva promised to do. But what if Mom Eva leaves again? What if you get tired of taking care of me? Dante sat on the bed next to her. Remember what Grandpa Sebastian always said, that you were special? I remember. He was right. You're special because you're brave, you're kind, you're a girl who's been through very difficult things but continued to be sweet and loving. That's not learned in any school. That moment, Evangelina appeared at the door. She had spent the last few days trying to find work in Harmony Creek, but the opportunities were limited for a 58-year-old nurse in a small town. Dante, I need to talk to you, she said. It's about Mark. In the hallway, away from Isabella's ears, Evangelina said that she had received a disturbing call. Mark called this morning. He's threatening to sue me for family abandonment. He said he's going to try to prove that I'm an unfit mother to get full custody of Michael and Sophia. Can he do that? He can try. And worse, Michael ran away from home last night. Sophia called crying, saying that he doesn't accept the situation and wants to come looking for me. A 15-year-old boy, alone on the road. Mark went looking for him, but no one knows where Michael went. And Sophia is blaming everything on me, saying that I destroyed her family because of children I abandoned. Dante felt as if he were being attacked from all sides simultaneously. The Miller family pressing legally, social workers questioning the suitability of the orphanage, Mark threatening a lawsuit, and now a missing teenager. Mom, Is there something you haven't told me about your separation from Dad? Something that can help our case? Evangelina hesitated. There is, but it's complicated, very complicated. What is it? Your father. He wasn't just controlling with me. He was controlling with everyone. When he found out about my pregnancy, he tried to force me to not have the children. Dante was silent, processing the information. Are you saying that Dad wanted you to abort the twins? Yes. When I refused, he kicked me out of the house. He said that if I wanted bastards from another man, that I raise them alone, without the family name or financial help. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because Sebastian was your hero, and frankly because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having submitted to so much control, ashamed of not having fought more for my rights. But that would change everything in the legal process. It would prove that you didn't abandon the children out of negligence, but because you were forced by extreme circumstances. And how would we prove that? Sebastian is dead. There are no witnesses. It was then that Dante remembered something. Martha, Dad's secretary, she knew everything. She was there during the whole investigation about you, if anyone has proof of the way Dad handled the situation. That afternoon, Dante went to Martha's office with Evangelina. The secretary was visibly uncomfortable seeing her former boss after so many years. Mrs. Evangelina, I wasn't expecting to see you again. Martha, I need your help. Dante told me that you knew about Sebastian's investigations, about him having found the girls. I knew, yes, but ma'am, there are things that your Sebastian asked me to never tell. Martha, interrupted Dante, if you know of something that can help Isabella, please tell us. She may be taken away from the family if we can't prove that we have the conditions to take care of her. Martha looked around nervously, then went to a file and pulled out a folder. There are letters that your father wrote but never sent. Letters to Mrs. Evangelina asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness for what? Asked Evangelina. For having been too cruel when he found out about the pregnancy. For having forced you to leave home in such a delicate condition. For having denied financial help when the girls were born sick. Dante took the letters and read them quickly. They were detailed confessions of Sebastian, admitting that he had been unfair, that he had let pride and anger speak louder than compassion. More importantly, there was recognition that Evangelina had tried to maintain contact about the health conditions of the daughters, but he had refused any communication. This is enough evidence to prove that my mother didn't abandon her daughters voluntarily, said Dante. She was forced by circumstances that my father created. But there's more, said Martha hesitantly. Your father. He had tried to find the girls years ago when he found out they were sick. But when he finally located Isabella at the Sunny Meadows orphanage, he decided to secretly take care of her instead of looking for Evangeline. Why? Out of pride. He thought that if he could take care of his granddaughter alone, he would prove that he didn't need Evangelina. That he could correct his mistakes without publicly admitting he was wrong. Eva started to cry. So he knew where I was all these years. He knew I was suffering, blaming myself for abandoning the girls. He knew. And in recent months he was sorry, very sorry. He planned to look for you and tell you the whole truth. But he died before he could do it, Dante concluded. That night, while organizing all the evidence he had collected, Dante received a call that would completely change the course of events. It was Michael, his 15-year-old half-brother who had run away from home. Dante, this is Michael. I think I'm your brother. Michael's call caught Dante completely off guard. It was almost 10 at night, and the teenager's voice sounded tired and scared on the other end of the line. Michael, where are you? At the Harmony Creek bus station. I took 3 buses to get here. I want to meet my real mom and this sister that everyone is fighting over. Dante quickly threw on a jacket and drove to the bus station. He found Michael, sitting on a bench, a battered school backpack beside him. The boy was tall for his age, skinny, with messy dark hair and the same green eyes as the family. Just another visual confirmation that they were really brothers. Michael, your stepfather must be desperate looking for you. Mark isn't my dad, and after what I found out, maybe he never was. Michael looked at Dante with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. Are you really my brother? Mom's son from before? I am. And you have another sister, Sophia, who must be worried about you. Sophia is mad at me, but she'll understand. I needed to get out of the house, Dante. Mark was saying horrible things about Mom, calling her a liar, an abandoned of children. I couldn't stay there listening to that. Dante took Michael to his house, calling Eva on the way. When they arrived, they found her waiting at the door, visibly emotional. The meeting between mother and son after the revelation of family secrets was tense, but touching. Michael, my son, you've grown so much, said Eva, hesitating to hug him. Why did you never tell me you had other children? Michael's question was direct, without adolescent roundaboutness. Why did you lie about your whole life? Because I was afraid that you would judge me like Mark did, afraid that you would discover that I wasn't the perfect mother you thought I was. But we were your family. We deserved to know the truth. Dante watched the mother-son discussion, realizing that Michael was verbalizing hurts that he himself had felt 20 years ago. The difference was that Michael was dealing with it at 15, at an age where emotions are more intense and decisions more impulsive. Michael, Dante interjected, your mother made mistakes, just like my father made, just like I made. What's important now is how we deal with the situation. I want to meet Isabella, declared Michael. I want to meet my sister, who is in danger of being taken away by strangers. The next morning, the three went to Sunny Meadows Orphanage together. Isabella was initially shy when she saw Michael. It was rare for her to interact with teenagers, but gradually she became interested in the older brother who had appeared out of nowhere. Are you really my brother? She asked, examining Michael's face. I am. And you're younger than I imagined. Michael knelt down to her height. But you're just as pretty as Mom said. Did Mom Eva talk about me to you? She did. She said you are brave and smart. Isabella smiled, clearly pleased with the compliment. During the morning, Michael played with her, helped her with some drawings, and demonstrated a patience and gentleness that surprised Dante. It was obvious that the teenager had experience taking care of younger children. You're good with her, commented Dante. I always took care of Sophia when Mom and Mark were working. I like little kids. Michael paused. Dante, can I ask you a question? Sure. Why do you want to stay with Isabella so much? You didn't even know her until recently. The question made Dante reflect deeply. Because when I found out she was my sister, I realized that all my life I felt alone. I always thought I was an only child, that I had no real family besides Dad. Discovering that I have siblings, you make me feel part of something bigger. What if you can't take care of her right? What if she's better off with that rich family? Then at least I will have fought for her. At least she will know that she has a biological family that cares about her. That afternoon, they received an unexpected visit. Sophia, Miguel's 12-year-old sister, had convinced Mark to bring her to Harmony Creek. The girl was furious, worried, and determined to take her brother back home. Michael Santos Silva, you can't just run away from home because you're confused, shouted Sophia as soon as she got out of Mark's car. Mom has been crying for 2 days. Marco Antonio was visibly shaken. The robust man that Dante had imagined as a villain revealed himself to be just a family man, confused and hurt by the discovery that his wife had omitted a fundamental part of her life. Eva, said Mark in a tired voice, I need to understand why you hid this from me. 10 years of marriage, and I didn't know you had other children. Mark, I tried to tell you several times, but I was always afraid of your reaction. My reaction wouldn't be to kick you out of the house pregnant like your first husband did, exploded Mark. I loved you. I still love you. But how can I trust someone who lied about something so important? Sophia, watching her parents' discussion, suddenly noticed Isabella, who was hiding behind Dante. The two girls looked at each other with mutual curiosity. "Are you Isabella?" asked Sophia. "I am. Are you my sister Sophia?" "I think so." Sophia approached slowly. "You're small. You're big." The encounter between the two was more natural than Michael's. Sophia, despite her anger at the situation, had the protective instinct typical of an older sister. She quickly began asking questions about Isabella's life, about the orphanage, about her favorite toys. It was during this interaction that something happened that completely changed Marco's perspective. Isabella had a respiratory crisis, something related to her heart condition, and began to have difficulty breathing. Eva immediately took control of the situation, applying medical techniques to calm the girl and administering emergency medication. "She needs to go to the hospital," said Eva with professional authority. Now, Mark, who was an electronics technician, but had taken first aid courses, immediately recognized Eva's medical competence. He helped her carry Isabella to the car, and during the trip to the hospital, he observed how she handled the crisis situation with calmness and knowledge. At the hospital, while Isabella was receiving care, Mark pulled Eva aside. "Eva, or Evangelina, or whatever your real name is," he said. "I can't pretend I'm not hurt by the lies, but I just saw you saving a child's life. I saw you being the competent nurse that I always admired." "Mark, let me finish. I don't understand why you hid this from me, but I understand that you have responsibilities that you can't ignore." He paused. "If this girl is really your daughter, if you really are a family, then maybe we can find a way to make this work." "Are you saying you accept Isabella?" "I'm saying I accept you. And if Isabella is part of you, then I'll have to learn to be part of her too." Sophia and Michael, who had overheard the conversation, exchanged glances. The family that had broken apart in discussions the previous week was reconfiguring in an unexpected way. When Isabella was discharged a few hours later, she was surrounded not only by Dante and Eva, but by Mark, Michael, and Sophia as well. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, she was not being treated as a problematic orphanage child, but as a member of a large and complex family. "Can I call you Grandpa Mark?" Isabella asked Marco innocently. "I think you can," he replied, surprising himself, "but I'll have to learn to be a grandpa first." That night, while Isabella slept in the hospital room for observation, the whole family gathered and talked about the future. They had less than 48 hours before the hearing that would decide if the Ferreira family would get temporary custody. "We have to prove that we can offer stability to Isabella," said Dante. "Not just financial, but emotional." "And how do we do that?" asked Michael. "By proving that we are a real family," replied Eva. "That we make mistakes, we argue, we hurt each other, but in the end, we support each other." It was Mark who made the suggestion that would change everything. "What if we all move to Harmony Creek? What if we set up a big house where Isabella can grow up surrounded by the whole family?" The proposal was radical. It would mean drastic changes in everyone's lives. But for the first time since the whole crisis began, Dante felt that maybe there was a solution that didn't involve losing people along the way. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon at the Harmony Creek courthouse. Dante had spent the previous night preparing arguments with Regina, while the makeshift family organized itself in his house to demonstrate unity and stability. Mark had managed to get a medical leave from work, and everyone was determined to prove that they could offer a suitable home for Isabella. But on the morning of the hearing, everything started to go wrong. First, an urgent subpoena arrived. The Ferreira family had hired a lawyer specializing in custody cases, Dr. Augusto Ribeiro, known for his aggressiveness in court. Along with the subpoena, a list of devastating questions about the Mendez family's ability to care for Isabella. "They know about yesterday's medical episode," said Regina nervously, reading the documents. "They are using this to argue that Isabella needs constant specialized care that you can't provide." "But my mother is a nurse," protested Dante. "She handled the situation perfectly." They counter-argue that it was an isolated emergency situation, and that in a home environment, without adequate medical equipment, Isabella could have died. The second complication came through Mark. His boss had called threatening to fire him if he didn't return to work immediately. The company was going through cuts, and his sudden absence had created problems in the projects under his responsibility. "If I lose my job, I can't guarantee support for the extended family," said Mark, clearly divided between the responsibilities. "And if you go back now, it looks like our united family proposal is unstable," replied Eva. The third and most devastating complication came through a call from Karen. "Dr. Dante, you need to come to the orphanage urgently. Something happened to Isabella." When they arrived at the orphanage, they found a scene that chilled everyone's blood. Isabella was sitting in a chair in Karen's office, crying silently, while an unknown man made notes on a clipboard. "Who are you?" Dante asked immediately. "Dr. Maurice Tavares, a child psychologist hired by the Ferreira family to assess Isabella's emotional state before the hearing." "Can they do that?" "With court authorization, yes," replied the psychologist coldly. "And I must say that the child shows significant signs of separation anxiety and fear of abandonment." Dante looked at Isabella, who stretched out her little arms towards him. "What did you do to her?" "We only asked about her feelings regarding the recent changes in her life. The child expressed fear that the new family will also abandon her, as happened before." Eva knelt beside Isabella. "Honey, what did this man ask you?" "He wanted to know if I was afraid you were going to leave," sobbed Isabella. "He asked if I didn't prefer to live with Amy, where nobody ever leaves." The psychologist continued taking notes. The child also demonstrated excessive concern about her medical condition, repeatedly asking if she will cause too much trouble for the family. It was obvious that the questions had been formulated to provoke exactly this type of response. Dante felt a deep anger, but knew that any explosive reaction would be used against them. "Dr. Maurice, is the evaluation finished?" "For now, yes. My report will be presented at this afternoon's hearing." After the psychologist left, the family had only 2 hours to prepare for what promised to be a brutal legal battle. Dante gathered everyone in Karen's room for a frank conversation. "You know that today may be the day we lose Isabella definitively," he said. "If anyone has doubts about this decision, this is the time to leave." Michael was the first to respond. "I ran away from home to come meet my sister. I'm not giving up on her now." "Me neither," said Sophia surprisingly. "She's little and needs people to take care of her, right?" Mark took a deep breath. "I called my boss an hour ago. I said that if he fires me for taking care of a sick family child, I'm going to sue the company for family discrimination." He backed down. Eva hugged her husband gratefully. "Then we're all in this together." "Then let's fight," said Dante. The Harmony Creek courthouse was busier than usual that afternoon. Word had spread through the small town about the case, and several acquaintances of Sebastian showed up to watch. The Ferreira family arrived punctually, accompanied by Dr. Augusto Ribeiro and a team of assistants. Amy was with them, dressed impeccably and carrying an expensive doll. When she saw Isabella, she waved excitedly, without fully understanding what was happening. "Isabella, are you going to live with me today?" The innocent question cut the heart of everyone present. Isabella looked at Amy, then at Dante and Eva, clearly confused about what was expected of her. The judge, Dr. Robert Nascimento, was a serious man of approximately 60 years old, known for thoughtful but inflexible decisions. He called on all parties to present their arguments. Dr. Augusto Ribeiro was devastating in his presentation. Using the psychological report, the precarious conditions of the orphanage, and the recent instability of the biological family, He built a convincing case that Isabella would be better off with the Millers. Your Honor, we have here a 6-year-old child with special medical needs who has spent her entire life in institutions. On the other side, a family that barely knows each other, who only discovered her existence a few weeks ago, and who has a proven history of family abandonment. He presented photos of the Miller's house, a mansion with decorated rooms, a large garden, a leisure area. Then, photos of the orphanage, peeling walls, old furniture, a dirt yard. Amy and Isabella are twin sisters who were separated by tragic circumstances. Our proposal allows them to grow up together in a stable environment with unlimited resources for education and health. When it was Regina's turn to present the defense, Dante felt that they were fighting a losing battle. How to compete with photos of luxurious rooms when all they had to offer were promises and good intentions. But Regina had a different strategy. Instead of trying to compete with material resources, she focused on the importance of biological family ties. Your Honor, this case is not about money or material conditions. It's about a child who is finally reunited with her biological family after years of forced abandonment. She presented Sebastian's letters, proving that Evangelina had not voluntarily abandoned her daughters. She showed medical reports confirming that Evangelina was a qualified nurse, capable of caring for Isabella's condition. And mainly, she presented testimonies from Karen and other people at the orphanage about how Isabella had changed positively since reconnecting with her family. Isabella is not a property to be disputed between families. She is a child who deserves to grow up knowing her origins, surrounded by people who share her history and her blood. But it was what happened next that completely changed the course of the hearing. The judge decided to hear Isabella directly. Young lady, do you understand why we are all here? I understand. You are deciding where I am going to live. And where would you like to live? Isabella looked at Amy, then at the Miller family, then at Dante and Eva. There was a long and tense silence. I would like to live with my real family, she said finally, but I also want Amy to continue being my sister. And who is your real family? Mom Eva, Brother Dante, Brother Michael, Sister Sophia, and Grandpa Mark. She paused. But Amy is also my family, and I don't want her to be sad. It was Amy who broke the silence that followed. Mom Patricia, why can't Isabella live with her family and I visit always? Just like I visit Grandma Ferreira? The question from the 6-year-old exposed the fundamental flaw in the argumentation of both sides. They were treating the situation as if it was necessary to choose completely between one family or another, when in fact there were other possibilities. Dr. Robert Nascimento sighed deeply. I am going to suspend this hearing for 2 hours. I suggest that both families talk to each other and see if they can reach an agreement that prioritizes the well-being of both girls. When they left the courtroom, Dante knew that the next 2 hours would be the most important of Isabella's life, and perhaps the last 2 hours in which she would still be part of his family. The 2-hour recess of the hearing was a whirlwind of tense negotiations, emotions running high, and revelations that no one had anticipated. The two families met in a small conference room at the courthouse, with Isabella and Amy playing in a corner under the supervision of a social worker, oblivious to the complexity of the discussions that would determine their futures. Ricardo Miller went straight to the point. Let's stop the hostilities and focus on what is best for the girls. We want Amy happy, and she clearly wants to keep in touch with Isabella. And we want Isabella in our family, Dante replied, but we don't want to separate her from the twin sister she just reunited with. Patricia, the pediatrician, spoke up. With the medical perspective, Isabella needs constant specialized care. Her heart condition can worsen without proper monitoring. We have access to the best pediatric cardiologists in the state, and I have been a nurse for 30 years. retorted Ava. I know exactly how to monitor and care for her condition. Besides, I know my daughter since she was a baby. I know how to recognize the signs of a crisis even before they appear. It was Amy who, without realizing it, offered the first clue to a solution. Dad, Richard, why is your house so big if it's just for 3 people? The innocent question made Richard and Patricia look at each other. Their mansion in Riverside had 8 bedrooms, a large leisure area, and had been bought thinking about having more children, something that didn't happen due to Patricia's medical complications. Amy, our house is big because we plan to have a bigger family, admitted Patricia. Then why can't Isabella's family live there too? That way we can always be together. The silence that followed was charged with possibilities. Richard, a businessman accustomed to creative solutions, began to think about the proposal logistically. It would be an unusual solution, he said slowly, but not impossible. The house has space for 2 families, especially if we adapt some rooms. Are you suggesting that we all move to Riverside? Asked Mark, clearly surprised. I am suggesting that we explore possibilities that benefit all parties involved. Dante leaned forward. And what would the exact arrangement be? How would this work in practice? You would have total autonomy over Isabella's upbringing, said Richard. We would continue to be Amy's legal parents. The girls would grow up as sisters, with access to the same educational and medical resources. And the costs? Asked Ava pragmatically. I would be responsible for Isabella's medical costs, for the education of both girls, and for necessary adaptations in the house. Consider it an investment in the children's well-being. Michael, who had been silently observing, asked the question that everyone was thinking. And if it doesn't work out? What if the families don't adapt to living together? Then we reassess the situation, replied Patricia, but at least we would have tried a solution that keeps the sisters together. Sophia, always practical, raised logistical questions. What about school? What about the friends we already have? Riverside has excellent schools, said Patricia, and you would make new friends. Besides, Harmony Creek is not that far away. You can visit whenever you want. It was Mark who seemed most hesitant. You are talking about completely changing our lives. My job, our house, our routine. Marco, said Ava softly, you yourself suggested yesterday that we all move to Harmony Creek to form a united family. This is the same idea, only in a different location. But Harmony Creek is our town. Riverside is their territory. Richard perceived Mark's reluctance and tried a different approach. Mark, I read your resume when our lawyers investigated the family. You are a technician specializing in industrial systems, correct? Yes. My company has a subsidiary that develops medical equipment. We always need qualified technicians. The salary would be significantly better than what you currently earn. The offer was tempting, but Mark still seemed divided. I don't want to look like I'm selling my family for money. You're not selling anything, said Dante. You are considering an opportunity that can benefit all of us, especially Isabella. It was at this moment that something happened that changed the whole dynamic of the negotiation. Isabella, who had been playing silently, approached the adults, carrying a drawing she had made. Look what I drew, she said, showing a sheet of paper where she had drawn a huge house with many windows, surrounded by trees and flowers. It's our new house, where everyone is going to live together. In the drawing, there were several small figures representing all the people present, Amy and Isabella holding hands in the center, surrounded by Dante, Eva, Michael, Sophia, Mark, Richard, and Patricia. Even Karen was represented, in a figure that Isabella had drawn visiting the house. Grandpa Sebastian once told me that family is who takes care of you when you need it, said Isabella innocently. So now I have a very big family to take care of me. Patricia started crying silently. She drew all of us as a family. Because that's what we are now, said Amy, joining the conversation. A big and different family, but a family. Richard looked at the drawing, then at the two girls, then at the adults who had spent weeks arguing about who had more right to take care of them. You know what? Maybe 2 6-year-olds are wiser than all of us adults put together? So you accept the proposal? Asked Dante. We agree to try, replied Patricia, with some conditions to ensure that it works for everyone. The next half hour was dedicated to establishing the practical details of the arrangement. Eva would continue to be Isabella's primary medical caregiver, but with access to the resources of the Miller's private clinic. Dante could maintain his law office, but expanding to serve clients in Riverside as well. Michael and Sophia would enroll in the same school as Amy, an institution of excellence that would offer educational opportunities that they would never have in smaller towns. Mark would be hired by Richard's company with a salary 40% higher than his current one, and the family would have a private wing of the mansion, ensuring autonomy and privacy. Weekends would be communal, with extended family activities, but during the week each family unit would maintain their own routines. And if Isabella wants to spend time with Amy or vice versa, asked Sophia. The doors between the wings are always open for the girls, said Richard. They can circulate freely throughout the house. When they returned to the courtroom, Dr. Robert Nascimento listened to the proposal with growing interest. It was an unusual solution, but there were no legal precedents that prevented it. Let me understand, said the judge. You are proposing an unofficial shared custody, where each family maintains legal responsibility for one child, but the children are raised together in a common residence. Exactly, confirmed Regina, with detailed agreements on responsibilities, costs and rights of each party. And the children agree with this? Amy and Isabella were questioned again, separately and together. Both showed enthusiasm for the idea of living in the same house, attending the same school, and being raised as true sisters. Dr. Augusto Ribeiro attempted one last objection. Your Honor, this arrangement is highly irregular. There are no guarantees that two families with such different backgrounds will be able to live together harmoniously. Counselor, replied the judge, there are also no guarantees that any family arrangement will work perfectly. What I see here are two families willing to make significant sacrifices for the well-being of two children. After an hour of deliberation, Dr. Robert Nascimento made his decision. I'm going to approve this arrangement for a 6-month trial period. If both families can demonstrate that the well-being of the children is being preserved, the situation may become permanent. When the hearing ended, Isabella ran to hug Dante. Brother Dante, does this mean that I will have my family and also stay close to Amy? It means exactly that, replied Dante. Hugging the sister he had almost lost, Amy joined the hug. Now we are real sisters, forever. Observing the scene, Richard commented to Patricia, You know, we always wanted to give Amy a sister. We just didn't imagine that we would gain an entire family together. Sometimes, replied Patricia, the best things in life come in unexpected packages. But there was still a final surprise waiting for everyone. A discovery that would completely change the understanding of the entire Mendez family history. 3 weeks after the hearing, while the two families were preparing for the move to Riverside, Martha called Dante with urgency in her voice. She had found something in Sebastian's office that would completely change the understanding of the entire story. Dr. Dante, you need to come here immediately. I found a secret safe behind the main file cabinet. There are documents that change everything. Dante drove to the office with Eva, who had spent the last few days organizing Isabella's medical documentation for the transfer. They found Martha visibly shaken, holding an old leather folder. This folder was in the secret safe, along with other documents that your father kept hidden even from me, said Martha. When I read the contents, what's in that folder, Martha? Birth certificates, Of Isabella and Amy, but they are not the certificates we know. Dante took the documents and began to read. What he saw left him in a state of shock. The original certificates listed not only Evangelina as the mother, but also a father, Carlos Mendez Santos. Carlos Mendez Santos, murmured Dante. This name, where have I heard it? Eva turned completely pale. Carlos was my distant cousin. Sebastian's cousin, too. He was the doctor who accompanied me during the pregnancy. Wait a moment, said Dante, processing the information. Are you saying that the twins' father was Dad's cousin? That Isabella and Amy are Mendez on both the mother's and father's side? Not only that, said Martha, opening another section of the folder. There's more. Carlos Mendez Santos was the son of a brother of your paternal grandfather who moved to another state. This means that the girls are doubly Mendez, completed Eva, her voice trembling. They are Sebastian's granddaughters through two different lineages. Dante sat down heavily in a chair. Why did Dad never tell us this? Why did he hide that he knew the girl's father? Martha hesitated before answering. Because Carlos died in a car accident 2 months before the girls were born. And Sebastian blamed himself for his death. How so? Carlos had borrowed money from his father to set up a private clinic. Sebastian denied the loan because of the situation with Evangelina. He said he wasn't going to help the man who destroyed his marriage. Eva covered her face with her hands. So when Carlos died in that accident, returning from a late-night consultation that he was only doing because he needed the extra money, Sebastian felt responsible, completed Martha. And when he kicked you out of the house, he knew he was abandoning not only his wife, but the daughters of his own cousin. That explains his obsession with Isabella, said Dante. He wasn't just taking care of an orphan child. He was trying to redeem himself for having denied help to her father. There were more documents in the folder. Reports from private investigators showed that Sebastian had tried to locate Carlos years ago, discovering his death only when he began to look for the twins' father. Handwritten letters revealed the weight of guilt he carried. There's something else, said Martha, removing a sealed envelope. Your father left specific instructions that this envelope should only be opened if something happened to him before resolving the family situation. Dante opened the envelope with trembling hands. It was a final letter from Sebastian, dated just 1 week before his death. If you are reading this, it means that I failed to correct the mistakes I made. Evangelina, you were right about everything. Carlos was a good man, and I killed him out of pride and pettiness. When I found out you were pregnant with his child, my anger spoke louder than reason. I denied financial help that could have saved his life, and then I kicked you out for carrying the children of the man I had condemned. Isabella and Amy are not only your daughters, they are my nieces, granddaughters of the Mendez family by right of double blood. They have the right not only to my love, but to the complete inheritance of the family. The original will left everything to Dante, but I prepared a legal codicil establishing that half of the entire family fortune must be divided equally among the 3 children, Dante, Isabella, and Amy. Dante, you now know the truth about why I always remained emotionally distant from you. It wasn't because I didn't love you, but because every time I looked at you, I remembered the coldness with which I treated Evangelina and Carlos. You were the constant reminder of my mistakes. You can read this letter together as a family. Perhaps you can forgive me. More importantly, perhaps you can build the united family that I destroyed out of pride. The silence that followed the reading was charged with complex emotions. Eva cried silently. Dante processed decades of family misunderstandings, and Martha nervously organized the documents. There's one more thing, said Martha. The codicil to the will. It's real and legally valid. Isabella and Amy are heirs to a significant portion of the Mendez fortune. How much money are we talking about? Asked Dante. approximately $2 million for each, plus properties and investments, enough money to guarantee college education, lifelong medical care, and financial independence when they reach adulthood. Ava looked at Dante. This changes everything, doesn't it? Isabella is not just an orphan child that we need to take care of. She is the heiress to a considerable fortune. And that further complicates our situation with the Miller family, said Dante. When they find out that Amy is also an heir of the Mendez, it may seem like we are trying to recover the girls for financial gain, completed Eva. That afternoon, Dante called Richard Miller and asked for an urgent meeting. When he explained about the discoveries, the reaction was exactly what he feared. "You're telling me that Amy is the heir to $2 million?" asked Richard, his voice filled with distrust. "And you discovered this just now, after the court agreement?" "Richard, I understand your suspicion, but the documents speak for themselves. Martha can confirm that the safe was sealed since my father's death. And how do we know this isn't an elaborate staging to get custody of the girls?" Patricia, more thoughtful, intervened. "Richard, if it was staging, they wouldn't have told us about Amy's inheritance. It would be easier to hide that information, unless they knew we would find out eventually and wanted to appear transparent." Dante felt the frustration grow. "Richard, I don't need the girls' inheritance money. I have my own career, my own life. What we discovered only confirms that they really belong to the Mendez family, or confirms that you have financial motivations for wanting the girls back." It was Amy who, without knowing it, resolved the tension. She had overheard part of the telephone conversation and asked innocently, "Dad, Richard, why is the money from my blood family a problem? You always said that money isn't what makes a family good." The child's question exposed the hypocrisy of the situation. Richard, who had used financial resources as an argument to keep the girls, was now questioning the financial resources of the biological family. "Amy is right," said Patricia. "If the well-being of the girls has always been our priority, then the fact that they are financially independent should only make us more comfortable about their future." "You're right. I'm reacting badly because I'm afraid of losing Amy. And I'm afraid of losing Isabella," replied Dante. "But maybe it's time for all of us to accept that the girls don't belong to any of us exclusively. They belong to an extended family that now includes all of us." "So the agreement still stands?" asked Patricia. "It does, but now with the additional guarantee that Isabella and Amy will have full financial security for the rest of their lives, regardless of what happens to any of us." That night, Dante went to the Sunny Meadows orphanage for the last visit before the move. He found Isabella helping Karen organize some donated toys, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just become one of the richest children in the region. "Brother Dante, is tomorrow our last day here?" "It is. After tomorrow we start our new life in Riverside. I'm going to miss it here, but I'm also excited to live in the big house with Amy. Isabella, there's something I need to tell you. We discovered that you and Amy are not just sisters. You are also family of Grandpa Sebastian on your father's side." Isabella tilted her head, trying to understand. "Does that mean Grandpa Sebastian was my real grandpa? It means he was your great-uncle, and that you have always been part of the Mendez family, even before we met you. So I always had a family, even when I felt alone?" "Always. It just took a while for all of us to find each other." Isabella smiled and went back to organizing the toys. For her, the discovery about inheritances and family lineages was less important than the certainty that she finally had a complete family that loved her. But for Dante, that final discovery had closed a circle that began with the cries of a child on a March afternoon. Sebastian had spent the last years of his life trying to correct past mistakes, secretly taking care of the niece he had helped to orphan. And now, through a series of events impossible to predict, the whole family was finally reunited. 6 months After the move to Riverside, on a sunny September morning, Dante watched through the window of the miller's mansion, a scene that still deeply moved him. In the large garden, Isabella and Amy played together in a dollhouse that Richard had specially built for them. Michael taught Sophia how to play basketball on the improvised court, while Eva and Patricia planned lunch in the kitchen, their voices mingling in conversations that had become naturally familiar. The experience of living as an extended family had been challenging in the early months. Different routines, parenting styles, and personalities had to adapt in a complex dance of coexistence. There were discussions about schedules, about educational methods, about children's limits. Mark and Richard needed time to understand their new dynamics as shared grandfather and stepfather, but gradually something beautiful had emerged from this initial confusion. The children, with the natural wisdom of childhood, had adapted much faster than the adults. Isabella had blossomed with access to regular medical care and quality education, while Amy had gained the large family she had always wanted. Michael had discovered an aptitude for engineering through projects with Richard, and Sophia had revealed herself to be a talented artist with the encouragement of Patricia. "What are you thinking about?" asked Eva, appearing beside Dante with 2 cups of coffee. "About how strange it is that everything started with a girl crying at a funeral, and how Sebastian probably never imagined that his secrets would result in such a large and happy family." Dante accepted the coffee, watching Mark teaching Richard how to fix a broken toy of the girls. "Mom, do you have any regrets about the choices you made, about the lost years?" Eva thought carefully before answering. "Regret about the past? No, because even the mistakes brought me here. But I have a concern about the future." "What kind of concern?" "About when the girls grow up and fully understand the complexity of the family history. When they find out about the inheritances, about the circumstances of their biological father's death, about all the secrets we kept." It was a valid concern. Isabella and Amy knew that they were sisters. They knew that they had 2 families that loved them, but they still didn't fully understand the tragedies and complexities that had shaped their lives even before they were born. "When the time comes, we will tell them the truth," said Dante, "but adapted to their age and maturity, and mainly emphasizing that the important thing is not how we got here, but what we built together." At that moment, Isabella ran towards them, holding a colored drawing. "Uncle Dante, look what I did at school." It was a drawing of the family, but much more elaborate than the first scribble she had made at the orphanage. Now, at 7 years old and with access to art education, her representations had become surprisingly detailed. On the paper there was a huge house with 2 clearly distinguishable but interconnected families, surrounded by colorful gardens and a vibrant blue sky. "It's beautiful, Isabella. Tell me about it." "Well, here are me and Amy in the middle, because we're twin sisters. Here are you, Mom Eva, Brother Michael, Sister Sophia, and Grandpa Mark in our part of the family. And here are Mom Patricia and Dad Richard in Amy's part. But see, the house is one, because we are all a big family. And these small figures here in the corner? These are Grandpa Sebastian and Dad Carlos in heaven, taking care of all of us." Isabella pointed to 2 figures with wings that she had drawn among the clouds. "Aunt Karen told me that the people who love us never really go away. They just keep taking care of us from a different place." The simplicity with which Isabella had processed and integrated all the family complexity was remarkable. She saw no conflict between having multiple parents, uncles, grandparents. For her, love was not something limited that needed to be divided, but something infinite that grew when shared. "Isabella, are you happy here?" "Very happy. You know why?" She leaned closer to whisper as if it were an important secret. "Because now I know that I'll never be alone again. Even if someone gets sick or goes traveling, there will always be many people to take care of me. It was the perfect expression of the emotional security that the whole family had worked to build. Isabella had learned that she could trust the love of the people around her. Amy joined them, carrying a math book. "Isabella, have you finished your homework?" "Not yet. Can you help me?" "Sure." Mom Patricia said that when sisters help each other, they both get smarter. Dante watched the two head towards the study table that they had adapted on the porch. The educational difference between them had decreased dramatically in recent months. Isabella had revealed herself to be extremely intelligent when given the proper opportunity, and Amy had learned patience and empathy by helping her sister. That afternoon, something happened that perfectly symbolized the transformation of the family. Karen visited the mansion, something that had become a monthly routine, bringing news from the orphanage. The institution had been completely renovated with part of Sebastian's inheritance, transforming it into a model reception center. "The children who are there now have opportunities that you can't even imagine," said Karen during the family dinner. "Tutoring, regular medical follow-up, artistic activities, and all because you transformed a personal tragedy into something that benefits dozens of other children." "It was Grandpa Sebastian's idea," said Isabella. "He always wanted to help the children at the orphanage." "And now he continues to help through you," replied Karen. After dinner, while the children watched a movie in the large room and the adults chatted on the porch, Richard made an observation that perfectly summarized the journey of all of them. "No, when Amy came into our family 6 years ago, Patricia and I thought we were saving a child. We never imagined that she would be the one who would save us all." "How so?" asked Mark. "Because it was her love for Isabella that forced us to expand our definition of family. It taught us that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, but multiplies." Patricia agreed. "And Isabella taught us that family isn't about perfection or ideal conditions. It's about people who choose to stay together even when it's difficult." Eva held Mark's hand. "For me, this whole experience taught me that it's never too late to correct mistakes of the past, that sometimes the path to redemption comes from unexpected places. And for me," said Dante, "it taught me that the life I thought I wanted, controlled, predictable, solitary, was no life at all. This beautiful mess that we built together is infinitely better." Michael, who had grown noticeably during the months in Riverside, made a surprisingly mature observation. "I think we've all learned that family isn't about blood or legal papers. It's about choice. Every day, we choose to continue being a family." When it was time to put the children to bed, Isabella asked Dante to read a story. It was a ritual they had established. Each night, a different adult read to the girls, but Isabella always chose Dante on nights that she considered special. "Uncle Dante, can you read that story about the girl who found a family?" "Which story is that? I don't remember that book." "It's not from a book, it's our story. The story of how I was lost at the orphanage and you found me and brought me home." Dante sat on the bed between Isabella and Amy, improvising a child-friendly version of everything they had lived through. "Once upon a time, there was a girl named Isabella who lived in a place where she had no family. She was very brave and kind, but sometimes she felt lonely." As he told the story, Dante realized that he was narrating much more than past events. He was narrating a real fairy tale where princes and princesses were ordinary people who made extraordinary choices for love. "And did they live happily ever after?" asked Amy drowsily. "They lived happily from that moment on," corrected Dante, "because they learned that forever is made of many happy nows, one at a time." After the girls fell asleep, Dante spent a few minutes watching them. Isabella held the rag doll that Ava had made for her years ago, while Amy hugged a teddy bear that she had won on her first day at the Sunny Meadows orphanage. Even sleeping, they remained connected, two halves of a whole that had been separated and finally reunited. As he left the room, Dante found the house gradually quieting down for the night. Mark and Richard were talking about a work project they had developed together. Ava and Patricia were planning an educational excursion for the children. Michael and Sophia were doing homework at the kitchen table, helping each other with a naturalness that had developed over the months. It was a scene of domestic normality that contrasted dramatically with the emotional chaos that everyone had lived through less than a year before. But it was a normality achieved with effort, built on foundations of forgiveness, understanding, and unconditional love. That night, before sleeping, Dante opened the bedside table drawer where he kept Sebastian's last letter. He had read it dozens of times, but he always found new meanings in his father's words. "Perhaps you can build the united family that I destroyed out of pride," he whispered the final words of the letter. "We built it, Dad," he said softly, "and it's more beautiful than any of us could have imagined." Through the window of his room, Dante could see the garden where everything had begun, with two girls playing together. Tomorrow would be a new day of discoveries, small challenges, simple joys, the everyday life of a family that had learned that love is the only thing that really matters when everything else falls apart. And for the first time in his adult life, Dante Mendez fell asleep completely at peace, knowing that he had found his place in the world, not as a successful lawyer or heir to a family fortune, but as a brother, son, uncle, and part of something much larger than himself. The story that had begun with a lost child ended with a family found. And that, Dante discovered, was the only happy ending that really mattered.